The Coffee House of Surat, Chapter 3 of Leo Tolstoy's What Men Live By and Other Stories, after Bernardine de Saint-Pierre. Read for LibriVox.org by Alan Davis Drake. In the town of Surat in India was a coffee house where many travellers and foreigners from all parts of the world met and conversed. One day a learned Persian theologian visited this coffee house. He was a man who had spent his life studying the nature of the deity and reading and writing books upon the subject. He had thought, read, and written so much about God that eventually he lost his wits, became quite confused, and ceased even to believe in the existence of God. The Shah, hearing of this, had banished him from Persia. After having argued all of his life about the first cause, this unfortunate theologian had ended by quite perplexing himself, and instead of understanding that he had lost his own reason, he began to think that there was no higher reason controlling the universe. This man had an African slave who followed him everywhere. When the theologian entered the coffee house, the slave remained outside, near the door, sitting on a stone in the glare of the sun, driving away the flies that buzzed about him. The Persian, having settled down on a divan in the coffee house, ordered himself a cup of opium. When he had drunk it, and the opium had begun to quicken the workings of his brain, he addressed his slave through the open door. "Tell me, wretched slave," he said, "do you think there is a God or not?" "Of course there is," said the slave, and immediately drew from under his girdle a small idol of wood. "There," he said, "that is the God who had guarded me from the day of my birth. Every one in my country worships the fetish tree, from the wood of which this God was made." This conversation between the theologian and his slave was listened to with surprise by the other guests in the coffee house. They were astonished at the master's question, and yet more so at the slave's reply. One of them, a Brahmin, on hearing the words spoken by the slave, turned to him and said, "Miserable fool! Is it possible you believe that God can be carried under a man's girdle? There is one God, Brahma, and he is greater than the whole world, for he created it. Brahma is the one, the mighty God, and in his honor are built the temples on the Ganges River, where his true priests, the Brahmins, worship him. They know the true God, and none but they. 1,000 score of years have passed, and yet through revolution after revolution these priests have held their sway, because Brahma, the one true God, has protected them." So spoke the Brahmin, thinking to convince everyone. But a Jewish broker who was present replied to him and said, "No, the temple of the true God is not in India. Neither does God protect the Brahmin caste. The true God is not the God of the Brahmins, but of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. None does he protect but his chosen people, the Israelites. From the commencement of the world, our nation has been beloved of him, and ours alone. If we are now scattered over the whole earth, it is but to try us. For God has promised that he will one day gather his people together in Jerusalem. Then, with the temple of Jerusalem, the wonder of the ancient world, restored to its splendor, shall Israel be established a ruler over all nations." So spoke the Jew, and burst into tears. He wished to say more, but an Italian missionary who was there interrupted him. "What you are saying is untrue," he said to the Jew. "You attribute injustice to God. He cannot love your nation above the rest. Nay, rather, even if it be true that of old he favored the Israelites, it is now 1900 years since they angered him and caused him to destroy their nation and scatter them over the earth. so that their faith makes no converts and has died out except here and there. God shows preference to no nation, but calls all who wish to be saved to the bosom of the Catholic Church of Rome, the one outside whose borders no salvation can be found. So spoke the Italian. But a Protestant minister, who happened to be present, growing pale, turned to the Catholic missionary and exclaimed, "How can you say that salvation belongs to your religion? Those only will be saved who serve God according to the gospel, in spirit and in truth, as bidden by the word of Christ." Then a Turk, an office-holder in the custom-house at Surat, who was sitting in the coffee-house smoking a pipe, turned with an air of superiority to both Christians. "Your belief in your Roman religion is vain," he said. "It was superseded 1,200 years ago by the true faith, that of Mohammed. You cannot but observe how the true Mohammed faith continues to spread both in Europe and Asia, and even in the enlightened country of China. You say yourselves that God has rejected the Jews, and, as proof, you quote the fact that the Jews were humiliated and their faith does not spread. Confess then the truth of Mohammedanism, for it is triumphant and spreads far and wide. None will be saved but the followers of Mohammed, God's latest prophet, and of them only the followers of Omar, and not of Ali, for the latter are false to the faith." To this the Persian theologian, who was of the sect of Ali, wished to reply, but by this time a great dispute had arisen among all the strangers of different faiths and creeds present. There were Abyssinian Christians, Lamas from Tibet, Ismailians, and fire-worshippers. They all argued about the nature of God and how he should be worshipped. Each of them asserted that in his country alone was the true God known and rightly worshipped. Every one argued and shouted, except a Chinaman, a student of Confucius, who sat quietly in one corner of the coffee-house, not joining in the dispute. He sat there drinking tea and listening to what the others said, but did not speak himself. The Turk noticed him sitting there and appealed to him, saying, "You can confirm what I say, my good Chinaman. You hold your peace, but if you spoke, I know you would uphold my opinion. Traders from your country, who come to me for assistance, tell me that though many religions have been introduced into China, you Chinese consider Mohammedanism the best of all, and adopt it willingly. Confirm then my words, and tell us your opinion of the true God and of his prophet." "Yes, yes," said the rest, turning to the Chinaman. "Let us hear what you think of the subject." The Chinaman, the student of Confucius, closed his eyes and thought a while. Then he opened them again, and drawing his hands out of the wide sleeves of his garment and folding them on his breast, he spoke as follows, in a calm, quiet voice. "Sirs, it seems to me that it is chiefly pride that prevents men agreeing with one another on matters of faith. If you care to listen to me, I will tell you a story which explains this by example. I came here from China on an English steamer which had been round the world. We stopped for fresh water and landed on the east coast of the island of Sumatra. It was midday, and some of us, having landed, sat in the shade of some coconut palms by the seashore, not far from a native village. We were a party of men of different nationalities. As we sat there, a blind man approached us. We learned afterwards that he had gone blind from gazing too long and too persistently at the sun, trying to find out what it is, in order to seize its light. He strove a long time to accomplish